Well, my name is Stan Deyo. I live in Perth, Western Australia. Have lived there for approximately 23 years. I was born in Texas, a little town called Clifton, 1945. 1970, I was recruited by Dr. James R. Maxfield on behalf of himself and Dr. Edward Teller to finish research on my energy conversion process and a technique for making circular wing flying saucers, electric devices. As part of the recruitment package, I was sent to Australia to finish my work. We had a falling out after about 18 months when I decided that, or when I discovered that they had too much technology hidden away from the public, and in my youthful ignorance, I protested a lot. I didn't understand why they held it back, and they figured that was a little bit too hard of a protest, and we parted ways. And since that time, I've written 2 books kind of exposing part of what they're doing without killing the intention of some of what they were doing. So this is the first time I've been back to the States in 26 years to do any public work. I did come through in '83 with a film crew on the way to Europe to do a documentary on Nikola Tesla, but this is a time that I'm coming back to visit the Hopi elders with a series of sacred gifts from the leaders of the Aboriginal community of Australia. So I stopped off to do this lecture here with the International UFO Conference in the process.
Okay. Now, I've seen some of your work that you did on video. I've seen Eye of the Storm on the Tesla video, and your conference video and the history of free energy, and they kind of all interlink with each other. What led you into that research?
Well, I guess it's like anyone else. You have pet interests. Tesla's interest, or the interest in his work, came from my father and my grandfather. My grandfather was an electrician. My father was a petroleum research engineer and a solicitor lawyer in Dallas. And they had always told me as a youth, if you really want to find something interesting, find out about this Tesla guy. Because in those days, back in the late 50s, early 60s, there was not much to be found on his work. It was still very locked away in Belgrade and back rooms in Washington, whatever, and even his patents were very hard to find in Washington. So it was one of those little mysteries that I did pursue whenever I could find a link into something Tesla. I did. And in the process, the film crew and I did end up in Belgrade, and by some other circuitous methods, we were able to lock me in a room with Nikola Tesla's personal effects for a while. Awesome. And I went through his top hats and tails and gloves and letters and 100,000 sheets of paper and 10,000 photographs, and found out a lot. There were some links to Star Wars technology. Let me think how we phrase this. When I wrote the first book, The Cosmic Conspiracy, part of it dealt with some Star Wars technology that was being tested in the early 70s off the southern coast of Australia. There was a U.S. Coast Guard vehicle in the water, and we could see the stripes on it, in attendance to Australian naval craft. There was a new kind of laser plasma device on board. Took a camera that shot 50,000 frames a second to record it. All the crew had to go beneath the deck, touch no metal, including the cameraman. He was the last to go down. 5 miles away in the sky was what's called a Gendevic drone aircraft, a target aircraft. And it was up in the target area. They locked onto it with their tracking devices, and the cameraman was told to get down into the safe area and touch no metal parts. And then you hear this gosh awful sound. I actually talked to one of the cameramen, and he said it's hard to reproduce with the mouth. He said it was a fearsome sound. But what happened was that there was a kind of a glowing beam, like a laser thing, that ionized the air all the way to the target. And the problem had been historically with laser weapons, when you would go to fire and hit a target, you could hit it, but the laser would melt the metal, and the metal would become like a reflective mirror, and you get what's called the plume effect, and it reflects 80-90% of your energy away from the target, so it goes cold, and you don't get the joy. So during the Vietnam conflict, way early in it, there were some tests done with lasers that ionized the air, made the air conductive, and you could pulse direct current tori, or smoke rings of charged particles spinning at high speed along this wire in the sky. So the laser became your conductor. So what happens, here was the target, the laser would lock on, ionize the pathway to it, these plasma donuts would come up, spinning like the smoke ring, and they would just eat out the target, just and throw it away. So you just chewed right through it. So it was a reasonably effective device. Now, the same technology as far as the spinning torus or smoke ring, which I can show you in a graphic, has been used to fly circular wing aircraft, flying saucers. UFO if you don't know what they are, and circular wing aircraft if you know what they are. I was recruited because I had designed, in 1970, I had designed a crude plasma aircraft, saucer-shaped, and it used the breaststroking smoke ring technology to streak it through the air, to form a vacuum in front of it and a partial pressure area behind. In essence, the entire surface became a flying wing. It was a nice design. It was certainly not what they use today much, but they had already built those kind by the time I came in. But because I'd come up with the idea, I was recruited, I think, primarily to kind of get me out of the country. Let me work in a quiet place and not say much about it, because I was very excited. And there is a very important lesson here with the process, and it applies in physics, and I suppose metaphysics as well. If you've ever been out and watering your garden, you'll know that if you take your garden hose and put it on spray and stick the nozzle down into dry sand and let it get wet, and you put the nozzle in, it starts to suck itself into the sand and just tunnel through the sand forward. If you take a bucket of water, fill it with water, and take the same hose with it spraying out like, just a normal garden spray, and just take the end of that nozzle down to the water, and just as you get right under the surface of the water, the hose will jerk itself out of your hand, go to the bottom and stick to the bottom. Now if you take the same hose out and out onto the concrete, it will bounce up and down trying to go like a rocket the other way. But if you put it in the water, it'll suck forward. Now why is this? You're going to shoot stuff forward, and yet you're going to move forward. How does that happen? Thin films curl around like this inertially and close behind you, and you make yourself a flying smoke ring. In the case of the nozzle, it's not very efficient with the water hose because the water is not allowed to recirculate too much. You do get some recirculation pattern. With a flying saucer, the main concept with plasma was to heat the air to a very high temperature using 6% CO2 doping in nitrogen gas and circulate a hot envelope around toroidal coils, direct current pulse toroidal coils inside the craft. What this did was it would take this air over the wing and underneath and form a convective circular torus. It took a while to wind them up, and certainly there was cooling out toward the edge of the wing, and so it took a while to kick-start them. Usually once you got those kinds started, you didn't want to turn them off until you were where you wanted to be. Problems, they had fires in the seals and things like that around the top, and when you got burning inside this field, it didn't leave unless you turned off the power. And if you turned off the power, you were vulnerable to detection by ground forces or whatever. In essence, you flew in a black cloud. There was one incident recorded out in the I think it was in the California desert, where a welder was out working on his stuff in a farm, and he had the goggles on, and one of them came down like that with a black cloud around it, and he could see the hot pipes and turbines turning inside. And he watched for a while, and then another light came out of the sky and landed right on top of the other and hooked onto it and took it away. So he went over to the area, walked into the area probably an hour later, and he was cold. The area in the middle of the desert where that was cold, thermionically cold. And all of these things would tell us that it was an electrodynamic, but it was a plasma craft. All right. The newer craft, I didn't design. I have seen them, photographs of them anyway. I've not flown in any of them. Use the same toroidal principle, but they do it in the magnetic field of the Earth, and you can counteract gravity, anti-gravity if you wish.
Okay. Would this relate to the Townsend Brown experiments?
A lot of people have asked about Townsend Brown's participation in the UFO propulsion field. Now, I didn't know Townsend well, but I did discuss with him, and I did have letters with him before he died off Catalina Island, off California coast. I did get to go through his laboratory at the Bonson Research Facility that was locked up before they broke the lab apart a few years back. And I do have his lab books, and I do have the only existing film of the research he did here in the United States. It's about 51 minutes on 16 mil film. It is my considered opinion, after going through all of his work and talking to him, that the majority of his work was in high voltage phenomenon, brute force, and pursuing the Byfield-Brown effect. And basically what he and Dr. Byfield discovered was if you have a capacitor here in the air, say this is a metal ring here that doesn't go all the way around, there's plastic, but metal here, and then you have this curved metal electrode here. You put a charge here, like that, and as you do, if you have the charge the right way, the disc will move like that, then it will stop. It only occurs in the impulse as you're building the field up and the dielectric stresses, and it'll move. We have a similar phenomenon in low voltage in a direct current wire. You can do the test yourself with a battery, car battery. Take a car battery, take about a number 32 gauge copper wire, very fine wire, sand the ends of it, make this wire go into one side of the battery here, go up and tape one end to the ceiling, make a big loop about that big, tape to the other end, take that end over here to the other pole of the battery, and touch it. And watch this loop of wires hanging there in the air go whew, whew, like that. Reverse the lead and it'll go whew, this way. To save you a lot of skull scratching, what happens is that, like in the Byfield-Brown effect at high voltage, at low voltage, high current, what happens is electricity goes down the center of the wire and to the other side of the battery and then establishes the back inertial twist. It's inertia in there. And while that's establishing, it torques the wire, and so it bends it out like this. And you'll see it on a long lever like that. We have made motors that were single conducting pipes. And you just lay them like this with the electricity running through them in pulses, and they would spin. They're not efficient, they're hot. They run hot because of the current draw, whatever. But these things are related to what Townsend Brown did. Townsend Brown also did have some input to the Philadelphia experiment, the invisibility of the destroyer escort, the Eldridge class, in the 1943 experiments in World War II. His participation, however, has been greatly exaggerated by William Moore, who wrote the book, The Philadelphia Experiment. And I say that because simply Townsend Brown asked me to say that. Okay. It wasn't quite as exotic as it was made out to be in the book. And he didn't write the book, and he did say to apologize.
Okay. My knowledge of that is limited to the information I've learned from the Montauk guy, Al Bielek. But it's more about losing memory and stuff like that.
I'm not sure that, yes, well.
I don't know how valid his claims are. Now I'm holding in my hands, I guess this is your latest book, even though it's a few years old.
It's the latest book. We have an edition of the Cosmic Conspiracy 1992, which has some more update, more current information.
Okay, I'm unfamiliar with this. Can you tell me what this book's about?
The latest book that we've done is the Vindicator Scrolls, released in 1989.
Okay.
This book started out as a collection of things I was interested in, as kind of a sequel to the first book. Most of the things in this book were related to, in the beginning, to new technology, propulsion. The wire experiment I told you about, in fact, is in the is in the Vindicator Scrolls, okay, illustrated. But then somehow or another, I tell in the book actually, it was quite weird. When I was compiling this stuff in the back room for the book, well, one night my partner came back from across town to meet me about something to do with the tax reporting. And we were sitting out in the living room with the computer on, and a lightning bolt hit right out in front of the house, hit the power pole. And it was a really violent storm we were having, and of course it blew all the power. And we had a joke about it. Wow, it must have been something we said, God struck lightning on us right here. So Ed and I talked, and we worked still on a number of very exotic electronic circuits, mainly aimed at energy conversion. And so there we were sitting in candlelight, and the wife was trying to fix food for the children by gas and candle out in the kitchen. And he says, well, what do we do now? We can't do the taxes, the computers are down, our hands are tied. So he says, hey, just on metaphysics, he said, whatever happened to that Ark of the Covenant? It was mentioned in the Bible that shot sparks out and everything, because that was our interest, electronics. And he said, I heard there was more than one Ark of the Covenant. I said, no. He said, yeah, there was, I'm sure. So we grabbed out one of the Hebrew Bibles there, and Greek Bibles, and started thumbing through. And in the process of trying to find about the Ark of the Covenant, we went into a thing in the Garden of Eden, and he said, oh, look, that flaming sword that went in every direction to the east of Eden, maybe that was an Ark of the Covenant too, a type of one. So I said, well, I think that's a stretch of the Hebrew, but we'll get a map out. So we grabbed a map out, and of the Middle East, and we tried to look in the traditional places for where the Garden of Eden might be and describe what this electrical phenomenon would have been. The power came back on. So we used the computer and we pulled down a world map, and we started looking at things, and he said, well, where do you think this Garden of Eden is then? I mean, if we could find that area where they described it, then we might get this phenomenon nailed down. So within a space of 30 minutes, to make a long story short, we did discover that it was a matter of scale, that everyone had been looking for a little Garden of Eden up near Jerusalem, and we were able in a space of 30 minutes to find out, wow, it's not there at all. It's in Ethiopia. And the Euphrates River ran originally through the Red Sea, up was the Jordan, and then down into where it is now, but it's broken in two pieces. And the first part of the Vindicator Scrolls does cover that, what I just told you, that story about how it happened, and then what research we did after that to find the Garden of Eden, and then to find after that Atlantis. All these things were an accident, or destined accident, I don't know.
Meant to be.
Yeah, by things beyond our control. I mean, it was just fluky. We never, who in their right mind want to go find a Garden of Eden today? It'd be that hard if it even existed, right? Or Atlantis, nice myth. There's 2,000 books published on it. Why would you want to write another one? But to our satisfaction, and I think to the Cousteau Foundation's satisfaction, we did find Atlantis. And we were on board the Alcyon in Perth with Captain Darasoff of the Cousteau Foundation, going over the maps and the costings of taking a craft into the Persian Gulf, where the capital of Atlantis is sunken at Abu Ali off the Kuwait coast. While we were doing this, it was after the book had been published, the Gulf War started, and the area was mined almost immediately. And even after the war was over, it was very difficult for us to take the risk, because a lot of the sleeper mines are still down there, the bubble mines that blow a big bubble in the middle of your midship and crack your hull. So we didn't pursue it any further. However, we documented it well enough. I mean, we kept no secrets. We told where everything is, maps, names, depths. I tried to recruit the United States Navy, since they were there, to assist with a ground-penetrating radar scan from their boats in the area. I told them exactly where it was. I tried the Department of Defense. I said, look, and they said, beg your pardon, you're looking for what? Atlantis? How did you get this number? Click. So,
Doesn't surprise me.
well, anyway, I mean, it's not like we were trying to cost them any money. We were just trying to tell them a great treasure, because there's electricity and other things down there. We did find some of the surface-cut mines in Saudi Arabia that were part of the Atlantean continent, which was all of Saudi Arabia, part of Iran, Iraq. We found in Bahrain some of the existing freshwater conduits that came to them under the Persian Gulf before it sank from the mountains in Iran. And we also have evidence in Bahrain, 80 feet under the current level of digging, of an advanced civilization. And when that was discovered, the ruling sheikh of the area stopped all foreign involvement in the dig. But there is an advanced civilization, which we think was the one spoken of by Plato, 80 feet down in Bahrain and available to dig in. Other cities are surfacing in the Ruab Khali, in the empty quarter of the desert of Saudi Arabia. And we built the whole area from Ethiopia over beyond Iran. We built it in the computer. We used some Russian data, because the American Defense Department wouldn't let us have it on the Persian Gulf. So we used the Russians' data for height maps, topography. And we recreated the entire Middle East on the computer, so we could fly through without getting shot at, by flying through on the computer to get the viewpoints that Plato described for various portions of Atlantis. And even Cousteau's guy said, he said, look, we were looking in the wrong direction 20 years ago. He said, you're absolutely right. He was standing in a different direction when he spoke of left and down the island. And when we turned it around, everything fell into place, everything.
That's good to know. I'm going to have to read your book. Now, in the Mystery Scroll section of this book, I see a UFO update. What would Majestic 12 have to do with what you were writing about here? Or what did you write about Majestic 12?
A lot of folks have mentioned the Majestic 12, meaning the group, of course, who were keeping everything secret from the public about the UFO or alien invasion or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether the people I work for, I mean, Teller would certainly have been a prime candidate for Majestic 12 if there were such an organization. But quite honestly, I had never heard of it in the group I was working with. It doesn't mean it didn't exist, and I've certainly read a lot of the papers that suggest it did. If it does, it is an organization that exists above and outside our government. It would tell presidents what to do. And if you think about it, if such a group were formed, it would have to be in the intelligence community or in the military community in a non-elected position so that it can continue between regimes.
Yeah.
And it would have to be somewhat independent. So when you look at it this way, the Secretary of Defense would have a higher security clearance than the President, and because he would be overseeing those which are continuing organizations. And so I suspect if such a thing did exist, it would be in the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the military and in the DOD. And certainly my contacts would indicate that most of the orders came out of DOD somewhere. And I must also tell you, a lot of people get cranky, irritated, because they weren't told about Roswell crash of 47, or they weren't told about the Philadelphia experiment. And they weren't told about our own flying saucers and the things we've done in the space program that are way beyond crude ballistic missiles. There is no reason for them to be cranky. If you stop and think, if you were in charge of, first of all, the information of the Philadelphia experiment, people died in that experiment. I've recreated parts of it, and I've hurt myself and members of my staff. It took a year to heal from it. It is a very volatile field to play with. It's a big unknown, and I thought I knew a little bit what I was doing, and so did the rest of our team. And we did manage to hurt ourselves. Now, if you turn it loose with every Tom, Dick, and Harry that can wire a Tesla coil or something, it could produce chaos, shorting in mains power in large amounts and just killing people, just fry them like microwave balls running through the air. It's quite a difficult thing, and I'm sure that there are people that know more about it than I do, but if you were in charge, you would not have just told that to the public. It's dangerous. It's like saying you can make an atom bomb with a bit of baking powder and some glycerin and potassium permanganate or something. You can't, obviously, but if it were that simple and you told everybody, you would be a little bit irresponsible because they'd blow your world apart.
Sure.
So, like it or not, there are forces that present a clear and present danger to the health of the United States and to Australia. We're greatly allied, the two countries, more so than with England at this time. And I feel that the Roswell crash certainly had to be kept secret. If you gain technology ahead of your time, and at that time the Russians were starting the Cold War, or we were, or something, we weren't getting along, you certainly wouldn't publish it to every UFO group or to people out there reading the magazines for sensationalism, so they could say, oh, now I understand what you're doing, because the other guys would know, and there'd be a big push on to find out what you're doing with the technology that you don't understand, that you haven't back engineered yet. Anyway, Dr. Edward Teller in our country here, since 1952, I think, has been in charge of over 50 projects to design and build and test circular wing type flying devices. Some are triangular, but in the main they are wing form rotated craft, and they use toroidal concepts in either electromagnetic or electrogravitic or plasma type fields. They do alter time passage, but not like a lot of the popular people say in their books and lectures and stuff. It's somewhat like this. If I were to take your body and put it in a special little chamber, and I could pump up the energy density of your field by pulse direct current, I could store energy in you. I could get your energy density level on your atoms to be so much greater than it is now that your reactions would be much faster. Your chemistry, your physics, everything would run at faster rates of passage, like, they would happen quicker. So if I did this to you and I energized you so that your energy density was double what it is now, for instance, then I would sit here and look at you, and you would seem to me, if you went up here to touch your eye or to wink, it would be quick motions like this.
Okay.
You looking at me through the field would see me going, whoa, very slow, you see.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay? Relative time passage. It's only physics and chemistry. The movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, of course, the guy jumps up into the future 40 or 50 years, sees his mate, and dives back into the past and saves the crew, and this is a little bit Hollywood
Yeah.
over what really happened. It was just an early stealth experiment without the paint. It was electromagnetics and toroidal coils that eventually became propulsion units. So anyway, the Majestic 12 guys oversaw many of these things, if they did exist. Someone did exist in charge of these projects, because Teller's people recruited me. We have had and do have bases in places that you would never eavesdrop on, and you would never drive up to the gate and film, because you don't have a submarine, for one thing, and it takes a submarine to get to them, some of the better bases. There are others that are in rainforests and areas that are protected by natural formations and foliage and fauna. But this is not all devious.
That's my next question. Are we developing new technologies to benefit
Yes,
humankind?
yes, they are. Problem is that the technologies do not guarantee that the men in charge of it have good intentions. Probably back in about 1974, things took a different turn in Teller and Maxfield's group, and they were men of very good intention, very high principles, still are. Somehow somebody got control of their group, and Dr. Sakharov, who was Teller's equal over in the Soviet Union, and they lost control of the grand plan. Basically, their grand plan that started out is, if we can't organize an alien invasion that we can control, then we'll make one. We will hold the technology back, because we need the cooperation of all the peoples, all the religions of this planet, to hopefully make a go at making a one-world society. I know a lot of people complain about one-world governments, conspiracy, and all this, and my book, my first book, named the guys doing it. And one day I sat back, in fact, even while I was writing that book, and I thought, if I were in charge of trying to bring this planet together, how would I get the Muslim to get along with the Jew, to get along with the Christian, to get along with the Protestant? You know, you see what I'm saying? The Catholics and Protestants. And then the myriad Aboriginal religions and Indian cultures. So how would I get all these guys together? And then, acting as a parent, I thought, right, if I brought my kids a bag of lollies, and let's say I had 4 or 5 kids in the room, they're up to about age 8 or 9, and I threw the lollies on the floor and I said, here they are, guys, divide them equally amongst yourselves. But they weren't all the same. Some were chocolate, some were raspberries, you see. Do you know what kind of mayhem would proceed from that as they fought over who got the goodies?
Oh, sure.
I would come into the room and I would take my belt off, like Bill Cosby says, you know, one's 8 feet wide with meat hooks on it, and I would say, right, if you're not dressed and together out there on the lawn for the family reunion, I am going to take flesh off of your bones. Do you understand? Yes, Dad. And to a one, they'd get together and they'd say, he's serious. Boom. And they'd go do it. They would overlook their differences in the greed. Look at the human race on the planet. Bringing them technology and gifts of peace, love, harmony, and all this. How many of them are going to fight that they didn't get their fair share? On the other hand, if you come in with weapons that could destroy them, that would cause them great pain, and say, if you don't get together, we're going to destroy you. And here's an example. Wow. Everybody would look in like the science fiction movies, like ID4, and they would say, hey, maybe we better overlook being Muslim or Catholic or this or that, and maybe we better get together and solve the problem. Well, that's the altruistic, the idealistic approach that was being taken by the scientists back in the early 60s and late 50s. In fact, there was one book written by one of them, by Agnew H. Bonson, that hired Dr. Townsend Brown, and Bonson's book was called The Stars Are Too High. And he wrote about the Council of Eight and developing this super secret flying saucer and using it to do just what I was talking about, to fool the people that a mass alien landing had occurred with technology so superior that we couldn't defeat it, and at that time they would then make demands of setting up a one-world government and show people it could work and get over the prejudice and keep everybody in line. As I say, it was quite idealistic. In practical application, it probably has about 0 chance of working. Because the guys in the Council of Eight, or the Majestic 12 if such exist, are humans. They have bad days, they have hormones, they have likes and dislikes, and this would make it fail. And it has made it fail, because fighting did occur amongst those that had the technology. Now, I left the organization in Melbourne, and part of the reason I was asked to leave was that I kept protesting that we weren't sharing this technology, at least delivering food and water and supplies to the underprivileged countries that needed it. You know, like we could solve problems in North Africa for water by giving them power converters that would just run day and night, and you didn't need to top them off with petrol, with gasoline. And they thought that this suggestion was rather naive on my part. And now that I've reached grandfather age, I understand. It's like giving the gifts to the children. If you don't get a psychological compromise between all these cultures, then giving one group technology over another is crazy. It just breeds war and instability. So, yeah, Majestic 12 may or may not exist. The X-Files, I mean, I watch it like an addict, and I did do some work with the FBI here, not as an agent, but as an informer. They recruited me to do that in Dallas. And it was investigating primarily things to do with Operation Illuminati that the director Hoover at the time was interested in. And in the process of doing that, well, I met some very nice people and learned a few words that are used and things and processes in the agency. And X-Files uses a lot of it. I was astounded when I saw them doing the alien expose. Some of the things they said, I thought no one knew. And there they were throwing it out. So I don't know who the writers are, but they did their homework.
Yeah.
Code names, you know, just really good stuff.
Amazing.
And no, I don't know any guy named Mulder in the FBI.
Do you guys have any questions for him?
Well, how would you sum up your message to people, I mean, through your work?
A lot of folks ask why I do what I do, what is the purpose of it. And I must tell you that in real life I have a computer business making web pages for corporations down in Perth, and I do real world lecturing at the university. This is kind of a thing I do as a public service on my spare time. The reason is that there is a lot of information that needs to be told now about the current earthquake threats, the solar energy increase threat, the threat of asteroid or comet impact in the next few years on the planet, the real and present dangers. And I do this and talk about the technologies that we have to encourage people that we're not totally destitute of defense or technology, and also to warn people that something's about to happen. In fact, several things. One is geological disasters, geophysical disasters, and astrophysical disasters, things way beyond our control. But also that it is my belief, after studying Hebrew and Greek and a few other things, that we are about to have a fake alien encounter, or a real one, in essence, a real alien encounter that was spoken of by ancient prophets and by relatively modern prophets in 98 AD in the book of Revelation by John. They spoke and warned us of beings coming down to Earth from a higher level, whether that be from other planets or from a parallel dimension. We could debate all day, but this message that I put out is to prepare people for the clear and certain present dangers from earthquake, volcanic eruption, tidal waves, subsidence of land, changes of water level from the southern pole ice shelf, which is melting at Ross Ice Shelf. In fact, it moved 387 feet 2 weeks ago toward Australia in one leap. And to talk to them about this hypothetical but very close to happening alien encounter. If you put it in Bible-type churchy terms, it would be the arrival of Satan and his followers opposing his messengers of light. If you put it in UFO terms, they're going to be little nasty critters, grays, little tall gray critters, and then some people that look like us arriving. They're here now, in essence, and they will afflict us, they will frighten us, the gray critters, the reptilians, and to the point that we will be totally afraid for our lives and our communities. And then suddenly, out of the sunrise, comes the guys that look like us in their spaceship, 6 foot tall, nice, handsome, you know, blonde, fair features, and they say, "Look, we mean you no harm. We'll fix these turkeys. They got loose and got out of hand. They won't bother you again. There's something that we may throw them away. Here we are, nice day. Let's put the earth together and make it peace, love, and harmony." And the Bible is very specific that we watch the first group that come and solve our problems and say, "We are God, worship us," and say to the leader of the world, whoever it is at that time, "Mark the people with their loyalty to us." And even if you didn't know a thing about the Bible, if you didn't believe anything in it. If someone comes to you and says, we're going to take your money away, we need to because the money has gone crazy, the markets have collapsed and whatever, but we're going to save your neck, we're going to save your assets and your money by giving you a personal ID marker number or something under your skin, there would be a very good reason for you not to support that right now and when it comes. And that is invasion of your personal privacy. You will have created a dictatorship that you will never get out from under by yourself. People who have access to all of your buying and selling of anything, if you play poker and that's your choice, and I give you $100 in a poker game, that's between you and me, and I don't want my wife or somebody else at the church to know about it. That's my business. So if we have this marker at a number and I have to give it to you by saying, let me just debit 100 credits for me and credit 100 credits to your account, there's a computer record, day, time, and who it came from and who it went to. Certainly it has advantages of getting rid of drug dealers and crims and all that kind of stuff, laundering money and all that kind of stuff. But the downside is, if somebody really gets narked at you in the database, your number gets X'd out, and you could be anywhere, in the air, on the ground, whatever. You've got no more money. You don't exist for a while. Now this means that the people in charge have to be trustworthy. And we're not talking about just the guy at the top, we're talking about every civil servant down the line that has access to the data. So for that reason alone, if anybody tries to put us to pure numbering systems now, personal IDs, I would resist it. I would go to live with the Hopi or with the Aboriginals in my country. And that's what I'm telling my sons and children and relatives. Just walk out of the system, have enough to put on your back, your walking boots, and get out. Leave everything behind, turn the key in the house. You won't own it anymore. Be ready to give it all away because you won't take it with you.
Sure.
That's part of my message, you see.
Scary thought. They're kind of like selling it to us now, you know, here, get a credit card. Buy
Well,
everything you
the
want.
guy, you know, the smart card was invented by some guys down in Perth, where I live. And it's only one of several things. There's also a fingerprint ID mechanism and iris ID mechanism that the credit card companies have been playing with for a number of years. A number of these devices have been tested, market tested. And the problem is, all these can be faked. You can make latex rubber fingerprints. You can alter iris patterns, or you can have sunshades on or contact lenses that will make the focus wrong. I mean, it might reject it, but you can even get pictures and stuff or digital data and input somebody's retina digital image into the system. A clever fellow can do it. It's not the average peanut that's going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So all these systems can be corrupted. The one that's very hard to corrupt is if you've got an indelible, non-removable mark on your body that can be scanned. You would have to cut the hand off. If you have it on the forehead and they cut the head off to do it, it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, there are a number of very good reasons, which we don't need to go into, as to why it has to be on the thin bony part of the hand or the thin bony part of the forehead, but these are functions of the powering and the accessing of the ID when you're in a shopping line or wherever without inconveniencing you, and to do it rapidly. You obviously wouldn't put a mark on your backside and drop your DAX to get your number read. I mean, it's got to be in a very practical place. And I did help in marketing discussions on this in 1970 in Dallas with representatives of the Union Pacific Railway, ComNet, and Sprint, who were discussing the merits of having money transfers along the track right-of-ways. It's not being done in this country, and Sprint technology is now being exported to Europe, where the main power of cashless money will come from eventually. Because I really do think America's in big trouble. I mean, probably the biggest threat it's ever had to its union. And the Hopi, when I talked to them, explained to me that very soon when these things start, that my white brothers, the Bahana, would kill themselves. They would fight amongst themselves even here in this country. There would be survivors, and those who survived, many of them would come to live with the Hopi in a new culture, but not until much bloodshed and war with other countries and terrible things about to happen.
Scary to think about.
It is a scary thing to think about. And as we sit here now, the U.S. stock market closed, I think, at over 6,800, the highest it's ever been. It is terribly, terribly inflated. The actual value of the shares over what the shares are worth, you know, the profit-to-earnings ratio, is just so horribly extended that it's going to take only just a little tickle and the market could collapse overnight. It can't grow infinitely. And a lot of the leading experts in this country in mutual funds are a little bit cautious. They're very cautious, in fact.
Don't blame them.
Well, people have asked me, you know, I'm not a financial advisor by any means. I do look after, you know, what we have in business, and people have said, well, do we convert it to gold? And I said, well, imagine yourself with a bag of gold coins, what, $100,000 worth? And you're driving down the highway now, and that's your medium of buying and selling. Average gold coin be worth what, $20, $50, $100? Who's going to tell what the value of that coin is? You want to buy a loaf of bread. You're not going to get change for it. That loaf of bread is going to cost you one of those gold coins, or maybe a couple, depending on the guy. He's going to bite it and say, well, yeah, like the old days, that feels like gold to me, I'll take it. Where are y'all headed, he'll say. That away. Good. Now you wonder, is he going to follow us and knock us off for the rest of my 100,000 gold coins? Well, I better carry a couple of big guns and kill somebody if they come after me. Do you see what it starts? Mm-hmm. All right, suppose you don't do gold. Suppose you do a month's supply of food for everyone in the family and your neighbors and your aunt and your uncle stuck in the garage. A few folks down the block know, hey, he's got food stored up in his joint. We've knocked off the Wyatt's food stores or Kroger's or whatever they are, and they're empty now. Well, let's go get some from him. You going to shoot those people too?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw a Twilight Zone like that.
Well.
The guy had the bomb shelter and wanted to lock his own family in, and everybody in the neighborhood knew he had a bomb shelter. And
well, it's the
they
same
destroyed
concept.
each other. Yeah.
Same concept.
We didn't listen to Rod.
So in the Rod was good. No. Yeah. We're faced, when we talk to people about investing, I say to them, I'm going to tell you a funny thing. Don't leave it in cash. Don't leave it in the share market. Don't put it in gold. Go and make friends. Buy them survival equipment. Teach them. Form community groups. Form local tribes. Guys that meet together with you so you know how to get to safety when the power's off, when the roads are broken, how you walk together out, how you make tents work. Be Boy Scouts. Be ready to go. Where do we go, they say? I said, well, some of the most geologically stable units and probably less desirable units of dirt or place to be would be in Arizona, New Mexico, the badlands that people don't want. Seismically, they're very stable in northern Arizona, western New Mexico, up in the northwest, and in the 4 states region there where they come together in the convergence. But I tell people, community, people, friends are more important than money in the bank and produce and supplies that you can't defend. It's like the Omega Man with Charlton Heston, that old movie. Yeah. They came after him and ripped him apart finally. And he knew what was coming. So that is the reason I'm bringing the message from the Aboriginal leaders of Australia to the Hopi. I had a strange dream vision back in February of '96, which led me to the Hopi here, and turns out I was the 5th of 8 messengers they were expecting, and I didn't know any of them or even what the Hopi were until I got here, and but I had seen the dream, the vision, and there were to be 8 of us called that way. So I don't do that sort of thing in everyday life, and it was most astounding to me, and still is. Even as we speak, in about 12 hours, I will be picked up by a gentleman from Las Vegas who has suddenly appeared here. It was in an audience we spoke to, and he's going to drive us up into 57 inches of snow to get to the Hopi reservation, and we coincidentally in the audience met one of the grandmothers, a Lakota Indian woman, older woman who is a tribal liaison, and she will take us into the tribe. So we will get there, snow or not, and if we don't, then the local authorities have ways to get in, but it's all we need is laid out for us, and we didn't even know who to ask.
That's amazing.
It is. A lot of it happens.